Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
I
Yeah,
can,
we can hear you guys. Can you
Cool.
hear me?
Yep.
Cool. I'm just gonna mute you all until we can get Sean. Does that work? Or mute this until we get Sean, so.
I see Peter's on. He had expressed some problems.
Yep, I'm here. I was able to get in. Thanks.
Has anyone heard from Sean? I will call him.
Okay.
I have not.
Sean needs 5 minutes.
Okay, I will be paying attention until then. I will be listening with my camera off for when he gets here.
I think we have everybody.
All right, we're rolling here. Let's get started. Special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. It's 8:35 on March 25th. I'll turn it, actually, if anybody has joined to make a public comment, now is your chance. Please raise your hand. You'll be elevated as a panelist. We'll see what you have to say.
Doesn't look like we have anyone.
Okay, in that case, we will close public comments. And we'll start our regular session. Discussion of potential actions to establish an official county position on state legislature. George, I believe you were the one who requested this meeting, so I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. There are two bills that I think we should consider a position on. The one that whose number I can remember right now is House Bill 1300, which would, as written, require mitigation upon the sale of a home. The other bill is about finding funding to match against federal funding to accomplish rail projects. I think that's the one we should talk about first. I am not recalling the bill number off the top of my head. And I actually think that Randy is better to describe this bill than I.
Yeah, it's about actually finding local funds through finding state funds to attract federal funds, rail funds. And it includes a number of things in it, but among them is to create some new toll revenues on rental cars and stuff like that to get tourists to help pay for another fee in toll lanes in order to be able to raise money that could be applied towards rail projects statewide. The catch is that the way it's written rather unclearly in creating the ability to change state law to allow those funds to be moved outside of the quarter in which they are collected to turn them into statewide funds. It's to create new funds, but the way the law is changed to allow those new funds to be moved, it appears to allow existing funds that we currently can collect, like the toll revenues and fines in the peak period shoulder lanes that are in existence now, as well as will be on Floyd Hill that are already dedicated, first of all, to pay for those projects, and secondly, to remain in this quarter, to be diverted into other quarters like the rail project, the ski train, the Winter Park ski train that's to be extended as part of this whole rail project up to Craig and Meeker. And so if you've seen the letter that Shoshana Lou called me up and wanted to talk about it, and we had a very long conversation, and then I sent her an email afterwards to recap that conversation and the concerns that we had already developed at the I-70 Coalition. As of the current time, Summit and Eagle County, I believe, I don't know that they've taken official positions, but the I-70 Coalition and I-70 Coalition hasn't had a meeting, but everyone I've talked to shares those same concerns. And if you read the email, it outlines the three basic things that we're concerned about. The first one is the assertion that I-70 congestion will be perceptibly or materially changed by the creation of the Mountain Rail project, and some different data sets, and I haven't specified those data sets, don't indicate that it would be by more than 1% or 2% at the most of the volume that's on that highway during peak periods. And if that's the case, that would be filled by what's called induced demand, which is where latent travel demand just backfills any additional capacity or relief that you get to the congestion very quickly. The second thing it does is it introduces a new term like travel sheds. So it kind of looks like if you could state that Northwest Rail line, the Winter Park ski train would materially change our congestion pattern, then they could claim we were in the same travel shed, and that's where the murkiness in the law gets a little risky for us. If it puts us in the same travel shed. Let me back up a little bit. Because of objections about taking funds out of corridors and putting them into other parts of the state, they created a new term called travel shed in this bill. And so they have said that they will keep the money in the same travel shed. The wording about the congestion in the I-70 corridor appears to set the stage for claiming that the Northwest Rail line would be in the same travel shed as the I-70 corridor. And to that, the I-70 Coalition and all of its members object strenuously. So, so those are the two main things. There's a third piece, which is that the new funds that are collected, we would hope to see specific language. This is not quite as important one, but a specific language that would say for rail and transit, those new funds that are collected should have a certain amount that's given towards transit throughout the state, distinct from rail, in order that all of these funds don't get gobbled up for the next 20 years by Front Range Passenger Rail and the Northwest Rail Line, which are about the only things they'll be able to afford in the next 20 years to get rolling. And so we want to know that some of those new funds that they're collecting do get diverted towards integrating other transit systems to the rail lines throughout the state. So anyway, so because of that, I'm recommending that we have that we take an amend position at this time. I've had a lot of conversation with Director Liu, also with Senator Fenberg, who's the one of the sponsors of the bill. And Julie McCluskey, the Speaker of the House, agrees with these assertions that I sent to Shoshana Liu. And she's telling Fenberg that the bill has to change and have these amendments. So I'm suggesting that we support an amend position at this time. And if they fix those problems, if they fix the wording in the bill, we could move to a support position, but that's what we're here to discuss, what we would want to do with our positions. First of all, do we want to take an amend position at this time? And then secondly, if they provide the amendments to alleviate these concerns, would we want to move to a support position?
I'll be pretty quick. I have a pretty dim view of this whole thing, just based on what I've seen happen everywhere else on planet Earth when it comes to these type of projects. I'm concerned that it's going to be a colossal waste of public money and a boondoggle. And I guess my position would be, I'd love to see somewhere similar to us with a density similar to our density here in Colorado, where projects like these have actually been successful. And if I see some track record of success, I'm happy to change my thinking.
Would I interpret that to mean that regardless of what amendments they put in it, you're not in favor of creating new fees in order to support a rail project? Is that what you're stating?
Unless I see something, unless I learned something that I don't
Okay.
currently know. And honestly, I don't know that much about this other than, you see what's happened in California and the, colossal evaporation of public money, and it makes me very cautious.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what you're, where you stood on it. So George, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for describing the bill. I'm oriented towards wanting to be able to support this bill. I think a bill that imposes a fee on an activity that our visitors are engaging in to have the revenue to bring down our federal tax dollars and get some important long planned for and desperately needed projects done is great. The thing that we have to assure, of course, and Randy, you said this, but is that the funding that's generated in this corridor stays in this corridor. If they want to talk about a new approach to new funding, that's fine. If they want to talk about existing funding, then they need to, like this bill is doing two things, right? It's raising new revenues, and then it's also trying to make it possible to take existing revenues and reprioritize them. That's the piece that we need to see go. And as soon as we see that piece go, I would like for us to be in support. And so what makes sense to me is for us to take an amend position now and delegate authority for that position to change when we're satisfied that the harms that this bill would inflict on us are removed. Does that seem reasonable?
Okay.
I'm not happy to support the amend right now. I just don't want to be dishonest to tell you what my likely future thing is. And my take on it is we can cross that bridge when we come to it. We can solve today's problem today.
Yeah. I think
Randy?
my view on it is that I generally, as you know, tend to support rail projects that make sense. These initial rail projects, Front Range Passenger Rail, and which goes from, depending on who you talk to on what day, goes from either Pueblo to Fort Collins or Cheyenne to, Raton or something. Ultimately, and they're hoping for at least Fort Collins to Trinidad is what they'd like to get. The initial project is going to be the north part only, which is from Denver north as of right now, the way it looks. And plus now added in this Northwest Rail line, expanding the ski train with Union Pacific up to Craig and Meeker. And that thing is almost a go no matter what. And I think the reason I support the bill is that for matching funds to help attract federal funds, it's trying to collect those funds, at least in part, from our visitors rather than from the taxpayers of the state. And I do know that the governor's been pressing the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board of Directors, which I'm on, to get a tax measure to the ballot this year, which would apply within that district. And so we wouldn't be voting on it and we wouldn't be taxed by it. So what they're trying to do is find a way to come up with some funds from our visitors to help get a project funded at the federal level, which has already been approved at the federal level for the first two layers of approval. So it's almost a done deal that this is going to happen in some form. And so I think my intention is going to be to support the bill once the harm that it can do to us by taking existing funds away has been removed. Becky Allman agrees, I believe, from what I've seen in emails from her. She's taken a read on it, and I've talked to her on the phone. And she seems to agree that the bill is vague enough that it doesn't offer those protections yet. And the Speaker of the House also now agrees after she's read my email and talked to a few other people. So, and so I think, so the question is, I know a lot of times in the past, and I'll bring this up, and George, you can comment on this. A lot of times in the past, we wanted to have, what's the status we're at? Are we going to, if two of us support this, are we going to take a support position if they resolve the amendment complaints?
One other thing I'll throw out there, if we're going to shake down our visitors, why don't we spend it on something like fire mitigation that it has pretty much universal consensus across the state as a need?
Yeah, I agree it would be good to do that.
I mean, I will share just some of the reasons why a rail project is really important to Colorado and to the people of Clear Creek County. We are in a non-attainment zone. Clear Creek County is on the border of a non-attainment zone. Our local data shows that we have an alarming number of ozone days as well. A big part of
maybe say what that is for people who might be watching this later who don't know what that is, which is probably most average people.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. We live in a Front Range area with very dirty air, and a big reason, unhealthy air, involving elevated asthma rates, all kinds of health impacts, etc. One of the biggest drivers of that poor air quality is our transportation system. And so that's why these rail projects really matter. They matter to finding a stable climate for those of us who are going to have to be here for a while and want our kids to be able to be here for a while. And so it's just a crucial project that I have no intention of opposing. Actually, normally I would just support it outright, recognize that Clear Creek's stake is not enough to really have a lot of energy on this. And that's where I'd like for us to get, is to just, be prepared to be supportive of this bill as soon as we're sure that it's not going to do any harm to us. And then, so that's, the motion I would make when we feel like this conversation is done is for us to take an amend position and authorize Randy to change that position to support when we're satisfied that this bill will not harm us, or to oppose if we become convinced that there's not a willingness to make this bill not harm us.
Yeah, I'll vote no, on that, and I think that's fine. I mean, that's how the process works. The only thing I would also bring up, are you, either of you aware of the bill that Bob Kirkmeyer is talking about that's modeled after a bill in the state of California to provide funds to repair dirty cars?
Yes.
Um, I don't know a lot about that bill, but my understanding is a bill like that has the potential to have more positive impacts in the very immediate future, in a way that's been proven to work at a price tag that's a fraction of what we're talking about here. What do you think about taking a support position on that bill?
My thoughts on that bill are I'm curious about how it can do a better job matching the scale of the problem, right? That's that bill I view as trying to tackle a very small piece of the problem and really just kind of replace a program that exists and like change it a little bit. I'm more interested in bills that um, have potential to change outcomes. And I believe this is one of them.
My understanding of that bill is that it addresses the small fraction of cars that produce half the problem. And that seems like a meaningful piece of the equation. And I mean, we should come back to this one. I just thought of it while you were talking about it. Because I mean,
Yeah.
I agree that we have a problem and that we should do what we can in a smart way to solve it. Part of the problem that we need to recognize is we have a unique geography that puts us at a huge disadvantage compared to many other
Yeah.
communities.
Well,
Randy?
George, was that a motion? You said the motion you would make. Was that a motion?
No. Sean, do you think we're ready for a motion?
Yeah, if you want, fine.
And then we can discuss after we make it.
Sean, are you asking that what if the motion only includes a position
Let me
now?
raise my hand.
What's that?
Sorry.
If the motion
I don't know. if I
does
can-
not give you guys, your mics are really hot. You should probably just mute if you want to. If the motion is only to take this position and not give Randy authority to change that position, I think the implication of that is that we will need to be prepared for another special meeting on pretty short notice because we do want to move fast as this bill moves fast. It's going to. Sean, what's your take on that? What's your preference?
No, I'm fine with that. And I mean, if you care about me voting yes on a subsequent bill to support it, it would be incumbent on somebody pointing me towards some data that this isn't what I fear it to be, which is a giant waste of public money. And I'm happy to vote no on it too. Like I said, I'm not, my feelings won't be hurt. I think I'm doing what I was elected to do.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is great. I think what we should do is I don't anticipate, and frankly, I don't think it's worth this board's time to spend to go through the brain damage to figure out whether we think this rail project is right. I think what we should do is focus on the harm that's going to be caused and then be able to get out of the way, be able to credibly tell our partners we're prepared to get out of the way as soon as we're satisfied. So for that reason, I'll just make a motion that we take an amend position on Senate Bill
184, I think.
184.
Yep.
Take an amend position on Senate Bill 184 and authorize Randy to change that position to either support or oppose. Oppose if we think we won't be satisfied, and support if we are satisfied.
With
That
the
this-
changes that reduce the harm to Clear Creek County, right?
Yeah.
Second,
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Randy, I just wanted to share that you and I had discussed me sending that email that you had sent to Shoshana to the other two. Unfortunately, I could not find that email. I know I saw it at one point, but I couldn't find it. So that has not made its way to Sean or George's inbox.
Yeah, I think I described it pretty well. I could read the email right now, but I think the words I used to describe the situation pretty well summarize what was in the email.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't need to read it with the explanation.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so sorry.
The motion passes 2-1.
Thank you.
I think she might be getting it. On Thursday, she did it.
Is there anything we need to do related to the other bill?
Yeah, House Bill 1300. What I want to give you guys an update on this bill and how the conversation's going. We're in a position where
Want to make sure she gets it because I know
you
what
guys. Brian, would you do me a favor? Would you mute the microphone in the room?
Yeah,
There's
yeah, Megan's coming through.
Yeah. Those microphones work really, really well. So House Bill 1300, as written, would require fire mitigation upon the sale of a home in the 12 counties that responded to a survey to CCI asking if we had fire mitigation codes. That bill is problematic as written. I would oppose it as written. There are a number of problems ranging from how they selected the 12 counties to what the bill sponsors thought counties' capabilities and systems looked like. So we've been talking to the sponsors. Let's see here. CC4CA and CCAP took opposed positions on this bill. We've been talking to the sponsors. Now this bill looks like it will be turned into something that gives counties the authority to do that if they want to try to create a program that would require mitigation upon the sale of a home, and give that authority to all 64 counties. And if this bill is truly permissive and we are not singled out, I would like us to support this bill. I think the core concept of the point of sale being the best time to require mitigation is worth allowing a county, and I don't know if it would be Clear Creek County, to innovate and see what we can get done. The problem that the sponsors are trying to solve is, I think, the right problem to be looking at. We have a lot of conversations about how to treat a new home and almost no conversations about what to do about the risk that's being generated on all of the homes that have been built over the last 100 or so years. The reason I think this is the right approach, rather than just we can require it at any time and show up on someone's property and say, now you have to get rid of your trees, is when you're selling a home, the seller is usually realizing some equity. As in, like, there's money that they have that they're getting that they can use for that project. The buyer has access to the cheapest capital that they probably ever will have access to because of the way that we basically subsidize mortgage loans here. And there's less of a connection to the trees, right? Like a big reason that people don't want to do mitigation is because they've been looking at birds in their trees for years and they love their trees and they love their birds. So I think it's a really great concept. There are a lot of things that you guys are probably thinking of about how hard it would be to design a policy that works in this space, because you don't want to delay real estate transactions, right? You don't want to greatly impact the price. You don't want to do something like create a massive spike in demand for wildfire mitigation services that causes inflation on a required project. So there's a bunch of things you would want to design for this policy. You would want to do things like allow people to put money into an escrow account so that project can be done when there's available labor and when it's the appropriate time during the year, right? One of the critiques of this bill is if you require people to cut down their trees in June, while the beetles are out, like, you're actually being counterproductive. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is this is a concept that deserves to be innovated with on a scale that I think is commensurate with giving counties the authority to try. And so I would like for us to support this bill. Right now, I think our position should be amend. I would like for us to be able to get to support if we find out two things: that it is truly permissive and that it applies to all 64 counties. So my apologies for the drawn out explanation. What are your thoughts?
I'm fine with it. while Randy gets off mute.
Yeah, I think I am too. I have one question where, and just for clarification, I think I know what the bill addresses. It's addressing basically defensible space. Am I correct? It doesn't require people to change the building materials on their homes in order to sell them, for example, like fire retardant exterior materials on a home that was built, 80 years ago or something like that. Am I correct?
Yes, well, let me say this, the bill I would want us to support would not impact anything about this structure. It would focus on the vegetation and landscaping in the immediate vicinity of the house.
Right. Defensible space. Okay. Yeah, I'm okay in supporting that same concept that we did on the last bill we discussed. And I would make a motion that we take a position of amend and give George the authority to track this bill and switch us to either a support or an oppose, depending on whether those concerns were mitigated or the sponsor showed any willingness to mitigate. If they don't appear to show willingness to mitigate, or if they change the wording in a way that's kind of superfluous, it doesn't really solve the problem, then, that was the last bill, it was the same kind of a situation. They were making changes to the bill with for example, with that travel shed and language, and the language didn't fix the problem. So same thing here, as long as they fix it to your satisfaction and your judgment is that and that it's permissive, that it's made permissive for 64 counties. Since every county is different, they have to be a little bit different with regard to their fire danger. They need to have I think, the ability and the flexibility to do it their own way.
Okay.
Was that an actual motion?
Yes.
Oh,
Long
second.
drawn out. Let me restate that. I move we take a position of amend and give George the authority to change it to either oppose or support, depending on how the amendments work out.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Anything else?
Not for me. The
All
roads are.
right. Any other matters to be discussed today? Any last minute executive sessions, anything like that?
No, I did have one question for the board. I wasn't sure whether or not, and I know George mentioned about delegating authority for somebody to act on behalf of the board at a certain point. Do you guys want to do that to avoid special meetings in the future? Not that there's any problem with this, but for example, if there's a particular area that Randy's been working on, or George or Sean, that the board delegates certain authorities for them to move on that and then inform the board? Just asking from a matter of convenience.
I mean, my take is that we effectively do that when we appoint each other to these membership organizations. Not to take a Clear Creek County position on a bill, but to advocate for a bill. I think it's rare that Clear Creek County itself needs to take a position. And I think it's appropriate when we want to do so that we discuss the bill in public.
Yeah, I think that when we're down at CCI and CCAT and they're taking votes down there, often only one of us is down there anyway. And we use our best judgment in that situation. We try to be careful because what you are speaking for Clear Creek County when you take a vote at CCI or CCAT. But we try to be careful about that to come back. I mean, that's why George brought this one back. If they get into the weeds and we think there's going to be any difference of opinion on the BoCC, then we try to come back and at least have an ability to articulate that. I think we should keep doing it the way we are doing it. And all three of us each use our judgment when we think we have something we need to bring to the board and say, I want to be able to speak as Clear Creek County. For example, I was going beyond CCI and CCAT and writing to Commissioner Liu. And if you read the email, you'll see that I wrote, I cannot speak for Clear Creek County or the I-70 Coalition because we haven't had time to take a meeting. I have talked to some of its members, and generally this is strictly for me based on what I've heard people say, what I believe are the appropriate issues. And it had to just be my words and not Clear Creek County's words. And so now I can speak to Director Liu and state that we have a position as Clear Creek County, as well as, speak to CCI and CCAT.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that just a little bit. I think almost all the time we're in a situation where there's legislation that impacts pretty much every county the same. And the county response to that legislation is pretty clear. These two bills we're discussing today because Clear Creek County's interests are a little different than some of the other counties around the state, like the counties that would get the rails built in their jurisdictions, and some counties that are just I don't know, like that CCAT or CCI or CC4CA will decide that the way that this mitigation bill has changed is sufficient. And so that's why I'm really seeking Clear Creek County to have a unique position to what the counties around the state are doing.
Right. Each of these bills selected a small section of counties, either the I-70 corridor in the case of the rail bill, to describe it as a beneficiary of a rail project that wasn't even here. And the other one, we were one of 12 counties that were singled out as being subject to this bill. So in each case, we were singled out from the rest of the state. So there was potential risk to us specifically. So
Is there anything else to discuss? Could we do like a super brief commissioner update? I have one thing I wanted to bring up, and that's the agenda for the fire protection discussion on April 1st. I think we should attempt to get that out today or tomorrow if at all possible. And I have a couple of ideas about what we need to make sure that we put front and center. We can talk about it a little bit now, or we can each talk with Brian about it, whatever people recommend.
I would suggest you talk about it with Brian only because it wasn't even on the agenda.
Okay.
So this would
But-
constitute a kind of an impromptu work session is what you're saying. Yeah.
I just don't want to launch the agenda on Friday with people having no opportunity to think about it, and particularly what I'm gonna get into it just a tiny bit. I think I think the group needs to discuss certain parts of the report. The report is quite detailed and long, and I would like to focus on a couple of specific areas of the report, which is why I want to give all the stakeholders a lot of time to go back and read those probably 5 or 6 pages out of the entire thing.
Sean, are you available for a call after this meeting?
Yep.
All right, I will call you. We'll get a draft going and I'll get it out to the other 3.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and Brian, just for the sake of making sure it's out there, I will resend that email to you that I sent to Shoshana Liu, Director Liu, and if you can circulate that or attach it to the meeting minutes or something like that, just in the interest of transparency, I think that would be good.
Will do.
Before we go, just as a reminder, the things that we agreed to put on the agenda, and it's not like those are the only things, and it wasn't written in stone, was to hear from the fire authority about the operational recommendations, which ones they agree with, how they would prioritize them. To hear from Peter and other jurisdictions' attorneys clarifying the legal boundaries surrounding these governance and revenue options. To hear from county manager about how we would operationalize the recommendation for the county to operate the fire department. I think at this point that would probably be, here are the questions we have that we need to discuss. Clear Creek EMS present on the findings, and then lastly, we agreed to revisit the conversation about whether we would sign the IGA as it exists today. So I'm just reading off my notes. Those were the things that I think said we would put on the agenda.
George, you were going to send those notes to me. Would you do that?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and then rather than stating what I want to add to that now, I will work through Brian and you will see that shortly, everyone.
Perfect. I think for what it's worth, I think it's a good idea.
Um, any other things to bring up, or if not, we stand adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.